if you're sitting inside of a jail or a prison, it's really important for you to start sowing seeds for your success. And the way that you should be able to sow seeds for your success is by really listening and learning from other people. That's what really moved the needle for me when I was going through 26 years in prison, is I looked for leaders. And that's what we are determined to do as our team, as a nonprofit, is to bring more leaders into the prison. And although they can't walk through prison gates, we can present them on video. And today we've got the privilege of introducing you to Casey, a self-made man who's built an extraordinary business. You can learn how you can do the same thing. So Casey, thanks so much for being a part of our program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, so I've discussed with you what our strategy is we really try to focus on helping people understand that there are really three principles for becoming successful. And this is things that I've learned from leaders like you, and that's focusing on communication skills. That's focusing on developing critical thinking skills, becoming a good writer, becoming a good speaker. And if somebody can do that, they can become successful in any industry. And you really help us make that point. Tell us about the industry that you're in right now.
So I'm in the construction industry, and I do roofing. We do large commercial roofing projects. And what I really liked about my industry was I did start to go down the college path, but I realized that in order for me to get prepared for the industry I was about to be in, I thought that on-the-job training would be better for me. And so I got to learn a lot about that in the field. I started in the field in the roofing industry. And another thing that I really liked about construction industry is that hard work pays off quickly. They don't judge you based off how many years in college you've been to or what fancy college you've been to. It was more about hard work, showing up on time. And I really think that's where a lot of today's industries are going. And it's not always about the college degree.
So we're going to get into all of that, but this is going to be about a 60-minute program. Because that's how much time as we have in prison to present these messages. So to start, just to give the people an idea of how big of a business somebody can build if they develop those skills, what kind of revenues did your company do in its best year?
So this past year, we did $28 million in revenue, and we've been in business for 5 years.
So in 5 years, you went from not having any sales to having $28 million in revenues. And you just mentioned that somebody doesn't have to only get to successful pathways through college. How did you go to college?
Just to maybe a year. I don't know that I made it even the whole year.
And that's why you're such an inspiration to so many people in prison, because a lot of the people that we try to share this message with aren't people that grew up with a real focus on education. They were influenced by other factors in life, and they've gone through struggle, and we're trying to show them pathways to success. Certainly the roofing business sounds like a great option, but let's now try to walk it back a little slower. And why don't you tell us about how it was that you got into the roofing business? When did you start? Tell us about your childhood. Where did you grow up, and what were your thoughts when you were growing up?
So I grew up in South Florida. My family came down here because the construction industry was booming, and they were from the city of Chicago. And it slowed down at that point where they were. So they were looking to, expand, not so much to make more money, but just to make money. So they came to Florida, and they started roofing. And, once I turned 18, or actually I got into it when I was 16 during the summers. I did always want to work and earn a living. And
slow it down a little bit. Let me just ask some really simple questions and help me get there in a slow way, because your story I find so extraordinary in the sense that it's like this intergenerational commitment to one specific industry. I reached out to you just because I knew that you were a successful businessman who'd started from nothing and built something great. And I think that's something that people in prison need to learn how to do. But it was, when I asked you about this, I understood that it was your grandfather that started in this space.
Yes, actually, my great-grandfather started into it, but my grandfather I know the best, and I think kind of took it to the next level.
So your grandfather was a roofer and your father was a roofer.
Yes, that's correct.
And then you grew up in South Florida. Was it South Florida or Northern Florida?
Yes, South Florida.
So you grew up in South Florida, and was your first job working for your dad's roofing company?
You know what? It wasn't. I wanted it to be, but at that time they couldn't get me on their work comp policy. So I started at Publix bagging groceries until I could.
How old were you then?
14. I remember the day I was legally allowed to get a job was 14 years old. So I went and applied when I was 13, and I had my first job at 14 years old exactly.
And there's an important takeaway or an important lesson there, I think, is that successful people, they really want to get into the labor market as soon as possible. And tell us, were you as devoted of a student as you were as somebody who wanted to go to work, or was work and earning a paycheck more important to you?
I don't know that I'm not embarrassed to say this, but I was not focused on school probably the way I should have been. I thought about, hey, how was I going to make a living? I would even read books during class about how to make a living. And so, no, unfortunately, it wasn't my focus. School wasn't, but I knew I wanted to work. I knew I had to work, and so that's what I did.
And that's, I think, the case of a lot of people, that people in jail or prison need to get that message. They need to recognize, I might not be a great scholar. I might never go to college. I may never, enjoy studying English or math or science or all of these subjects that are necessary to get credentials, but that shouldn't block me from reaching a high potential. At least it didn't you. How long did you work in a grocery store?
It was, I would say it was roughly a year and a half.
Do you know if there were any lessons that you learned in working at a job like that stayed with you or helped to form who you became, or how you matured, or the career that you built?
Yes, you know what I did like about at least starting for a corporation like that is they had a lot of SOPs, standard operating procedures in place, and you had to follow them. They had a good training program, had to clock in and out. It was very precise and specific. And as you think, some of these large corporations are. So those are some things that definitely stuck with me. And there you weren't allowed to be 1 minute late. So I appreciated what they did teach me in the first year and a half.
You used an acronym, SOP, and some of our audience might not know what that means. Could you describe what that stands for, and what does excellence look like with regard to SOPs?
Yeah, so believe it or not, okay, so SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedure. And where I really started picking up on it was from one of my best friends actually hired me as a master's degree in accounting. And so he took care of my accounting stuff. So he ran things maybe a little different than I did, but he was in the military. So everything to him was SOP. And so some of that translated to my business now. So we have SOPs for everything. And I think if you want to be great, you come up with good SOPs and you use those to train your staff. You follow them. You do it consistently. And once you find that winning formula, I think that just kind of makes your company what it is, and how it becomes great.
And that is a great lesson from a business leader, because we, as people who are living in struggle, have to think of our life as a business, as we have to be the CEO of our life. And we just heard from somebody, where we are hearing from somebody who doesn't have a university degree, but within 5 years took a roofing business from nothing to more than $28 million in revenues. And how many people did you employ?
At its height there, I think about a year ago, it was 255 employees around there.
And how many jobs would you say you've created over the course of your career?
Oh, goodness. I mean, you start buying materials and from other vendors. I mean, I would say the company probably takes care of thousands of people between all the different industries that we touch.
And that's what's really important, because if you're going to be the CEO of your life, we're learning that it's really important to be disciplined, to be deliberate. And that's one of the lessons that we teach in our course. In fact, we have a whole module on accountability and awareness, and making sure, how do we define excellence at every single role? Well, just as Casey learned to do that at a big grocery store, and that he implemented those standard operating procedures in his company, how can you do that to your life right now? For example, how many books should you be reading every week? What should you be learning from these books? How are you recording? How is all this going to translate into your success? The more you think about it, the more you can execute on that. And that's what I guarantee you, we're going to continue hearing that message throughout Casey's story of growing up as a teenager, building a career, and then building a business that is responsible for providing thousands of jobs. So Casey, you said that you worked in the grocery store, I think, for about a year. What happened after that?
So then I was allowed to start working on the roof. The work comp would cover me at that age. And so I started working weekends, summers, and then even like a lot of these schools that we'd put roofs on, they could only have people working at nights. So I'd get off school around 3 o'clock, and sometimes they were even roofing the school that I was still in school at. And I'd just jump on the roofing crew back then. And so I started roofing, I think 15, 16 years old, and I've been roofing ever since.
So 15 or 16 years old, jumping on the roof. So you were not privileged as being the son of the owner and just got to drive around in a fancy Bronco and hang out. You actually did the mopping and the lifting and everything else. Walk us through like what a typical day on the job looked like.
Yes, and a lot of times I started in the summer, so it was super hot. And, I was with a lot of other, I would say most of the guys were grown men that have been doing it a long time. And it was, I liked the culture. It's made me who I am today, but it was a tough culture. These guys were tough men, and you didn't show weakness. You fell in line, you did what they did, or they were going to toss you out real quick. And at the time it was very difficult, but I'm glad they did that to me. I learned a lot of good lessons from that. And then they taught me a lot, worked on the roof for probably close to 15 years. And so we mopped hot asphalt, 600 to 700 degrees. I still got burns all over my arms from back then. But, that hard work has taught me a lot of what I know today, and what those guys in the field, whether they knew it or not, taught me what it took to become who I am today. So I think that was really important for me. And so I roofed, and then at some point I did transition into some of the office work, but I'll tell you what, it's not nearly as rewarding as it was working out on a job in the field, doing that skilled labor and seeing what you've built every single day. That was rewarding, a lot more rewarding than sitting here in this office with white walls around me.
Well, when you were mopping that hot tar on the roof and doing all that heavy lifting and the grunt work of what it takes to be a roofer, a successful roofer, what was the typical shift? How many hours a day would you work on a job like that?
So I would say, like, if there was nothing going on in the economy, no hurricanes had hit, you worked at least 60 hours a week. You were at the office at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning. And again, that was one of those things, is like, you didn't want to be the last man in the office. Like, they let you know if you were. I mean, they told you, hey, you're the last one in. And so we did that every day. Always worked Saturdays. Again, it was one of those ego things. Like, you couldn't be the guy that didn't work Saturday and everyone else did. And so, they taught me some of those lessons, but that's how it was. Every day was hard work, hot work. You got used to it. I would say after a few weeks, you got used to it. And, you did it. You were proud of what you did. Just getting into it, like early on in summers, was the very difficult part. It's like when you don't have a job, you get into that job first week, maybe kind of rough, first few weeks kind of rough. But then once you have that mindset of, hey, I need to learn this and I want to be better, you will be better. And I actually remember that day. And I was a teenager at the time. I remember the day thinking to myself, this is terrible. But then going, hey, if I'm going to make a difference and this isn't going to be terrible anymore, here's what I need to do. And I still remember the exact job the exact roof I was on when that day came for me.
So if you're sitting inside of a jail or a prison right now, I want you to know that you could learn a great lesson from what Casey just told us. I know that I would have learned a lesson. While I was climbing through 9,500 days in prison, I would look at stories like Casey's and say, I want to be a guy like that, a guy that regardless of what my educational level is or what my background is, if I work hard, if I learn how to, as they say, play well with others or work on a team or be there, you could hear the things that he just told us. It was really important to wake up early, be the first one on the job, be the last one to leave, never let your teammates down. He may not have used those same words, but we certainly heard that message when he said, I want to be the first one. I don't want to be the last one there. I want to work on weekends. I want everybody to know I'm part of the team. And that's something you could start working on right now, because it's not easy to do. Sometimes in prison, you're around people you don't like. sometimes you're in prison and you get people looking down upon you or treating you differently because you're in prison. And that might be staff members. It might be other people in the population. But I guarantee you, a guy like Casey has had many of those kinds of encounters. Could you give us some examples of some times that you had to work with people that maybe you didn't get along with well on a social level, but you could work together as a team to get the job done?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started, I felt like a lot of these crews were already put together, and a lot of them were family or friends, and so they had they did have their own cultures. I mean, they ate different foods, they just believed in different things, and that was okay. That was eye opening for me. And then there was a time where they had a large immigrant population move into my area, and they all spoke only Spanish. And to me, that was very difficult for me at first because it was very hard to communicate. And, sometimes when you can't communicate well, there's that kind of frustration, and you're working out in the sun, and, they're telling me to, hey, go over there and get that hot asphalt. And maybe I'm telling them the same thing. And so that made it difficult. But, at the same time, I just kept thinking in my head, hey, if I want to do better, if I want to be better, I got to get along with these guys. I actually took it upon myself to learn Spanish. And at that point, the guys respected me a lot, and then it eventually earned me a title of foreman. And so, early on, I didn't know these guys. I didn't know their culture. We did get frustrated at each other, but I decided to just buy into what was going on and make the best of it. And it turned out really well for me. And to this day, I know another language because of it. And so, there's that same thing happened to me quite a few other times, but I think that's a good example of it.
That's a great example, because sometimes in prison, you're around people from all different types of cultures. I was in Fort Dix, New Jersey, a federal prison. And I remember them making a point of saying there were people from 91 different countries in that institution. Wow. And many of them spoke different languages. Many of them those people believe differently. But in any prison, you're going to have people from every socioeconomic background. And what's crucial, the ones who succeed are the people that can learn how to interact with other people. That's one of the lessons that I just heard Casey talk about. It was important for him. Not only did it get the other people, his teammates, to buy in, to letting him become part of the crew, but it had accelerated him to not only become a roofer, but then become a foreman and other areas as well. So could you tell us a little bit about how your career progressed from starting as an entry-level roofer to, you just said, a foreman? What duties came along with being a foreman or another supervisor as you continue to evolve your career?
Sure. So, we came in as a labor, and what was really cool is the roofing company I worked for, they had different color like tags on the board for schedule. And as soon as you learned these 3 or 5 things, you got changed to a different color. So, for me, I took a lot of pride in that. I didn't want to be the pink tag no more. I wanted to be the green tag.
The pink tag is what the laborers were?
That's right. I mean, they let so being a pink tag was, not the popular thing. And so you wanted to graduate in a different thing. So, I always found out what I needed to learn next. I was like, hey, boss, can you teach me this? Can you teach me that? And so, I think you take care of those guys that know what they're doing. They'll take care of you back. And so they taught me a lot of good things. And then I was fortunate a hurricane came around, and so they needed to promote a couple foremen. And at that time, they gave me my own crew. And at the time, it was mostly the Hispanic workforce, which it was great because I got along with those guys well, spoke their language. We respected each other. And so we worked together for years, putting on roofs and as a foreman. I would say about maybe 6 or 7 years after that, they made me a job superintendent where I watched multiple jobs. And at one time they sent me off to Tennessee, and I got to manage the largest roofing project in the country that year. And I lived there for 1.5 years with my wife, and I was, proud of that as well. To me, it wasn't even so much about the money anymore. It's like, as soon as you figure out that you like something, it just all becomes that much easier. And so going up there, doing that, it was a pride thing and an ego thing, and I really enjoyed it. And so that's kind of where I ended there as a superintendent.
So there's a big lesson there, because there's different skills that have to go along with just maybe, and I don't know roofing, I can only know what I see. And that's like carrying the hot tar or maybe operating the machinery that puts the tar on the roof and the asphalt shingles or the tile shingles on the roof. I'm going to splice into this video some of those videos from your company so that we can kind of get a visual of seeing what your company does and what an extraordinary company you built. But what the lesson that I am listening to, that I'm hearing, that I would have heard when I was listening, is I would be thinking, and this is what I would suggest you do if you're in jail or prison, think a little bit about, well, what does it take? What is the different skill set to be a roofer versus being a foreman or a superintendent? When you're a foreman and a superintendent, aren't you also, in addition to being responsible for getting the job done, you're also responsible for making sure that everybody on your crew is performing at a certain level? And doesn't that require you to use some skills like math and writing?
It does. It definitely does. So, you do bring back a lot of those skills that you learned in even middle school. I mean, basic algebra is very important. This, the size of a roof, you have to know that width time length equals the square footage of that roof. And then you got to order the materials for that job. So actually a lot of those skills, and some people think they're very basic, but a lot of those skills I use still every single day in putting on a roof. And then, you got to fill out timesheets and you got to take care of the guys and make sure they all sign off them. So there is a level of responsibility there that you got to have. And in those things, hopefully, you can learn anywhere. It's about being responsible, but it's important.
Well, the hard thing for people, and this is why I reached out to you, Casey, to help share this story. And I want you to know that our entire team is so grateful to you. You run a very big company. You've got hundreds of people that work with you, and you're taking the time out to share this message with people in jail or in prison. But the reason I find it so powerful is because people in jail or prison, they may get forced. They're not people that believed in education a lot of times before they went in. But while they're in, they may think that the only thing that's important is getting a certificate, like a GED certificate or something like that. They don't fully understand what's the relationship between understanding math and geometry and algebra and bringing more value to an employer. Like, I've got to think, you've employed hundreds of people. If somebody's got great muscles and they're strong and they've got a work ethic, they might be able to lay a roof, but they may not be able to figure out square footage or bid a job or estimate how many shingles they need. And if I could tell you, hey, I'm really good at algebra, I'm really good at geometry, I'm really good at communications, I'm really good at organization, would I increase my job opportunities with a company like yours?
Yeah. Yes. And you know what? We see it all the time. So in just management, we're always talking about, hey, who are the guys coming up in training? We have different training programs. What knowledge do they have? And I would say one of the biggest things that we talk about all the time for almost every position at our company is, like you said, math and algebra. But if I'd even take it a step further, which incorporates those two things, it's a program that's very important to us. And I'd probably say almost every company out there would be Microsoft Excel. And it does all the math and the algebra and those different things for you. But we use those things all the time. And a lot of it is just basic math, but you got to have it. And those are the guys that know those things that get moved up as superintendent, then project manager, and then some of our highest paid positions that are over $100,000 a year that didn't do any college time are our estimators. And those are some of the guys that are best with math.
So I want to respond to that because I know a lot of guys in jail or in prison who are watching this. And the first thing I'm going to hear if I'm teaching inside of a jail or a prison is that, oh yeah, well, they don't have access to Microsoft Excel in here, so there's nothing I can do. But that is nonsense. Because in order to become good at Excel, you first have to understand basic arithmetic, subtraction, multiplication, and division. If you don't understand those concepts, you'll never learn Excel. And if you don't understand English, you'll never learn how to read or understand instructions. But if you can learn basic math and basic writing and basic reading, you are going to advance your possibilities for higher levels of learning and higher levels of position. That's just a fact. It's great to start in an entry-level position as a roofer. Casey started that way and built a $30 million company. You might be in jail and you might be working in the kitchen. You might be working on the landscaping crew. You may hate it every day and complain every day. Or you could listen to the attitude that we hear in Casey. And that's, you got to invest in yourself. Invest in yourself first, and you can reach a much higher potential. So Casey, I want you to continue, because you're inspiring me as I look at this. When I listened to stories like yours when I was in prison, and I didn't have access to these kinds of videos, but I could read stories, and I would always read biographies of self-made people that started on their own with nothing but hard work and a commitment, and they became successful. And that's what's inspired me. And I try to inspire guys in jail. I never ask anybody to do anything I didn't do. So I'm learning from Casey right now. And I hope that members of our audience are learning from Casey right now. When you transitioned out of that role at Tennessee after putting on the biggest roof in the country, I think you said, how big was that roof?
Oh, I believe it was about 4 miles long and 400 feet wide.
So massive project that I have no doubt you had a responsibility for bringing it in on time and on budget. And to do that, that requires a lot more than knowing how to operate, a roller. That requires some basic math, basic English, good organizational skills, good critical thinking skills of knowing how to get the job done. Because sometimes things go wrong and you got to make adjustments. Tell us, for example, some things that didn't go the way planned and you had to adjust. I remember one time you told me about bullet holes in the roof.
Yeah, so there were 2 things on that project. One of the biggest things on that specific project up there in Tennessee was there was a labor shortage. And so, we had a budget for the project. And, the guys all of a sudden figure out they could go make money down. I brought them from Florida, and up there in Tennessee, they paid the guys more money. And I didn't realize that when I was pricing the job from Florida. And so they ended up, probably 30 guys at that point ended up leaving. And so I had to figure out a way to train more men and get more men on the job and keep the job on schedule. And so that was something we did. We had to come up with training programs there on site quickly, put the guys through the training and teach them how to roof again. So that was an issue that came up. And again, we use a lot of our, basic things we learned through previous jobs, like SOPs we put into place quickly. A lot of the communication skills we needed to teach these guys quickly. So we had to put these things in place so these guys could be good at it and put this project on.
And see, that again really emphasizes the need that every person in prison needs to be focusing today, not on just how many calendar pages are turning, but rather, when I come back to the community, how am I going to persuade somebody like Casey that I can be the most valuable member of your team? And, if I can do that, I think you overcome a lot of the barriers that complicate life for so many of us who have backgrounds that are going to come up on a criminal background check. And that might disqualify us for a lot of jobs. But let me ask you, Casey, when you were in that labor shortage and you needed a man on the job, did you have any problems or any resistance to hiring people that had that were formerly incarcerated?
No, not at all. To me, the important requirements were, and I think you hit on them earlier. It was just being able to show up every day, show up on time, and those were very important. Obviously, the other things we talk about as they progress in the job, but no, I mean, we did not discriminate in any way, shape, or form.
So see, these are really important lessons for people in jail or prison, because there's all kinds of restrictions that complicate life for people in prison, but there's always a way around it, always. And the more we invest in ourselves, the more we demonstrate that we can bring value to an organization like Casey's, the better the chances are that we can get started in an entry-level position and hopefully rise above that. I really would be paying attention how he keeps referring back to standard operating procedures. And my question for you is, what are the standard operating procedures of your life? What time are you getting up in the morning right now? How is that self-discipline and being self-directed influencing what you're doing every single day? If you can document that story with a journal, with lessons that you are learning, how you're contributing to a job, you are going to accelerate prospects for your success. So when you left Tennessee, Casey, tell us about the next phase of your career.
Yeah. So, I worked at a large family business, and I think in order to keep the family close and tight, I thought it would be better that I went and separated myself from the family. And um,
How old were you when you decided to go out on your own?
I was 27 or 28 years old.
So how old are you now?
I'm 35.
So in seven years ago, what were you earning like on a typical job or a typical week or something like that?
They paid me roughly at that time. I think I was on salary and I don't know. I was probably making around $900 a week
So
at that time.
$900 a week. And did you have any savings or had you built up any financial stability when you were 27 years old, making $900 a week?
The equity I did have, and I didn't know that
Equity in what? What did you own that you
I
had
had a
equity?
home.
Oh,
I
you
had
owned
a
a
home.
home.
Yes.
Okay. So
Um,
you were kind of stable then already at 27.
I was semi-stable, but at 27 years old, I still had a lot of lessons to still learn.
Uh-huh. And so you decided to go out on your own. Did you have to invest a lot of capital to get started, to start your own roofing business?
I don't know that I want to tell my secrets about everything, but I will tell you on this one. No, I didn't. I didn't have a whole lot of money. I didn't really have any money, and I still remember where I went and did my first job. I didn't want to take on too big of a roofing project because I didn't have but a few pennies to rub together at that moment. And so I did a $600 roofing repair. I estimated it myself. I did the repair myself, and I sent the first invoice myself. I know exactly where that job was, even still today. And so then I got that money, and then I was able to do a little bit more work, and then a little bit more work, and it just kind of compounded. And if you just stay on top of it and keep pushing forwards and moving forwards, and you can do it. You don't need a whole lot to start.
So there's a great lesson there because the truth is that somebody might listen to Casey's story and just say that he's lucky. But the reality is that $600 job that he got, he had been training to be able to do that job for more than 10 years. He said he started roofing when he was 15 years old. And it wasn't until he was 27 that he went out and tried to do it on his own. So imagine all of the expertise that Casey had developed over those, 12 years from 15 to 27. He knew every aspect of roofing. He knew the tools. He knew the language. He knew how to motivate other people around him. He knew how to speak Spanish. He knew how to hire people. He knew how to build strict SOPs, standard operating procedures. He knew how to train. He knew how to get the job done. He knew how to do quality control. He knew how to send an invoice. I didn't even know what an invoice was when I was 27 years old. I mean, Casey had learned a lot because he really had invested in himself. And it didn't mean he had to go to college and go into $200,000 of student loan debt. It just meant that he had to do what he could to learn and be the best in the world at what he could. And then he got that job and continued working. And then how long did you stay as just like a one-man operation doing everything by yourself in your business?
I would say, the business didn't really grow until a few years after. I would say I was small, but not in a bad way, not because we couldn't do the work. It was just, you get one job, and then from that one job, maybe you get two, and then, it just kind of grows naturally. And if you work hard and you do good for every one of these customers, it started growing. So, I'd hire a guy here and there. And then I remember when I had up to like 8 or 10 people, I was super excited. And I never had this goal of creating this monster company. I still was just focused on doing good quality work, just being able to give my customer a quality product. And I was proud of my product. And so to me, that was my focus. And so naturally the business grew. And it wasn't my initial idea to get this big company and grow this big company. I was just proud of what I had done. And really what made me proud is the team around me when they were trained and they were passionate about what they did. That was the most rewarding thing out of the whole thing.
Well, that's there. See, that is the mark of a leader. And I certainly would have been listening and learning from what Casey just said. It doesn't happen overnight. There is an old cliche that says an overnight success is generally 20 years in the making. And right now, wherever you are, you are sowing seeds for what you will become 20 years from now. And you can be a guy who's complaining about how the system isn't fair and how somebody puts you in here and how nobody cares and there's no programs to learn. Or you can be self-directed and you could focus on learning to develop stronger communication skills. You could focus on learning how to develop math skills. You can focus on learning how do I make the best decision every single day so that when I sit across the table from a potential partner or somebody that can help me grow, or a salesperson that might, or a buyer that might consider giving me a job, or a supplier that might consider giving me credit, you got to be thinking today about what can I do to make myself more powerful and more persuasive so that when those opportunities open, I'm ready to seize the initiative. And Casey, that brings up a big subject, a big question for me. And, certainly I'm not trying to pry into your personal affairs, but I'm trying to teach as many people as I can. And you're a leader. So I got to turn to a leader and ask these kinds of questions. When you went from getting that first job of $600 to having to get enough work to keep 8 to 10 people working all the time, it would seem to me that now the skill that is necessary is some level of marketing and sales and persuading customers, hey, I'm the guy to hire. How did you go about doing that?
You know what? I think the big thing for me was I was open to learning, right? And I still knew that I could learn a lot and I wanted to learn a lot. So I did kind of the same thing as you're doing here. I would get on different webinars, or anybody that was willing to teach me, I would go to and learn. I'd go talk to marketing people and go learn from them. And so anything that I didn't know, I was just open to learning, and I would try to learn those things because I knew I had to. I had to take care of those 8 to 10 people. And so, that's really how I did it. There was no formal education or training for it. It's just something I wanted to do.
So in growing a business like this, I got to believe that there must have been some challenges or problems as you're starting with one job that you got for $600, then another, then another, then another, then eventually you're hiring 8 or 10 people. What are some of the complications that come with growing a business like that?
Yeah, so one of the big issues that we ran into early was cash flow and being able to pay for material and then collecting from the customer. So we did a good job. Now we were able to sell more roofs, but now I needed more money to pay for material. And the issue with that is
how long does it take from the time? Okay, because you got to pay your workers every Friday or something like that, right? And right. A roofer's making $15 to $30 an hour, I guess, somewhere in there. That can be pretty expensive every week.
Yes.
How long does it take from the time you get a job to the time you have to buy materials to the time you get paid? What's that?
Yeah, so oftentimes we'll start a project. We have to pay for the materials up front. And then, like you said, we're paying for the labor up front too. So on our side, we've paid for the whole job and now we're sending that invoice. And we did a lot of work for property managers and general contractors and even regular private customers. You send them a bill in the mail and it takes them some time to pay. Well, with some of these contractors and property managers, they take 30 to 60 days to pay. So at that point, I had to find some alternative sources of funding. And I had a guy who I had done work for. And he really liked the product he got from us. And, I kind of vented to him and complained to him about, hey, it takes a while to get paid. And, all these people want us to do more work. And he talked to me about going in business with us.
So, wow, hold on. Lots of lessons in there. Let's slow that down a little bit because now you're talking about now you're different. Now we go through different stages. Anybody yes. can get a pickup truck and know how to burn some hot tar and start a little job. And that's great. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is awesome that you could earn a good living and provide a good product. But to grow, I just learned, and I know that if I were in prison, I said, well, I want to learn how to do that. What Casey did, it's how do I persuade other people, not only my workers, but other business people to invest with you and grow with you. And one of them you'd said was a supplier. Sometimes you have to buy materials. What's the process, first of all, to buy the roofing materials? How does that generally work?
Sure. So, this brings into account some of those things you need to learn, even that I learned in high school. So the guy would have to go out and measure the roof, and then he would have to do a takeoff, and that's just quantities of the valley metal or the eave and drip edge and the hip and ridge and those different things. So you had to be able to add and tally all that up. And once the project was sold, that typically got turned over to our production team. And a production team would have all those quantities right on their list of things that they needed to purchase. And so we would issue a purchase order to the material supplier vendor. And at that time is when we'd have to pay for the materials.
So look at the diagram here that when we talk about the standard operating procedures, what Casey can rattle off so fluently and easily is not, there's a lot of skill that goes into architecting that strategy. So the first step that I would have been listening to, that I would have learned from Casey, and that I would recommend you learn from Casey, is first of all, you've got to get the job, right? Because there's a lot of people competing for the job. Yes. And some kind of way you got to persuade I guess it's called a buyer, right? That you're the right vendor. Okay. Let them say, yes, I'll buy it from you. But Casey needs to advance it a little bit further because it's a big order. Like, what does a typical roof cost range?
Oh, I mean, they can range anywhere from 10,000 to we're doing roofs this year that are 3 or 4 million.
So $10,000 minimum, that was the lowest end. That's still a big number. So you need a contract or something type of a binding agreement where the buyer says, I will take this. The seller says, this is what I will provide. And this is the consideration. It gets all spelled out. And I got to assume that these contracts that you write are rather, they protect your company, right?
They do protect our company, and they're also, they need to be written well so the customer trusts that you're going to give them the product that you say you are.
So again, why is learning to read and to write so important? If you want to do jobs like this, you've got to have a contract that looks professional, and that even if you hire somebody to do it for you, you've got to be able to read it and say, does this reflect what I'm going to deliver? And does it inspire confidence in the customer? That's why contracts are important. And then Casey said something else. Now he's got to do this job of measuring and understanding, well, what do I have to buy? Right? That's not an easy thing to do. It's easy for him, but it's because he's trained 20 years to learn how to do it. But when you take all this stuff and you put it all on a spreadsheet, maybe now you're also about building business. Did you ever group together, well, I'm going to need this much material over the course of a month, and try and negotiate a better deal from a supplier? Could you do things like that?
Yes. Every single job, we would make that list of some of the things that we needed, and we would figure out all the other jobs going on at that time. And then we would try to negotiate better prices. And oftentimes we'd send that shopping list over to 3 or 4 different roofing supply houses and find out where we were going to get the cheapest price. And
you see, all of that is part of the skill set of managing and leading a great business, because you're going to end up having inventory in your yard, and that has a value. And how many times can I turn over that inventory? And that is, I've got to understand the difference between an asset and a liability and a profit and loss statement and a balance sheet. There's so many skills besides learning how to mop the tar. And it's great to mop the tar, but if you want to build something more, the more you invest in math, English, critical thinking skills, the more likely you are going to be to build a successful and prosperous company. So Casey is giving us a real life example of how he built a $30 million company. I can tell you, it didn't happen by accident, and it didn't happen because he was lucky. It happened because he had a strong work ethic. He developed strong communication and leadership skills, strong math skills. And he may say he's not a university graduate, but he's built companies bigger and better than many people who graduated from Harvard and Stanford. That's just a fact. And he knows it, and I know it, and now you know it. The question is, what are you going to do with this information? So Casey, I'm going to carry on a little more from your story, because you give so many lessons, but you gloss over them like they're nothing, but they're really impressive. So you said that you sat across the table from a successful customer, and he was interested in you and wanted to see you grow. In what ways were you able to strike a deal with him to help your company grow?
I did. So I ended up, in essence, at that point, I sold him some shares of the business, and so he became part of the business. I learned a lot from him. He was a large general contractor at the time, so it was an adjacent trade, but it was different. So I could learn some new things at that point. And then on Fords, I had a little bit more capital to take on larger projects. And so at that time, again, all those things we talked about with 8 or 10 people, now we were doing it on a larger scale. And, we were able to negotiate better terms on projects. We were able to get, now we were looking at doing large schools and large retail shopping centers and things like that. So it really opened up the things that we were able to do. And again, at that point, we were, then gosh, we had those SOPs in place, because that's when it became a lot more difficult. But those SOPs kept us in line where we needed to go, and it allowed everyone else to know what we were doing.
So again, every question I ask, I get 100 more questions, because when I listen to Casey, I say, oh, he just raised a term. I sold shares in the company. Well, that brings an entirely new, different skill set that we haven't discussed yet, but certainly would have inspired me when I was sitting inside of a jail cell. That's in fact how I learned. What is a corporate share? What does that mean? And that means we've also got to develop some knowledge of corporate structure. How do business entities exist? What are they? Could you give us a little kind of a 10,000 foot summary of what that means to sell shares in a company, and how you assess, well, how am I going to sell shares? What's the value of a share? Could you give us a little bit of corporate insider information for somebody who doesn't know much about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So, someone had to teach me when I opened up my business. I was really good at roofing and hot asphalt and putting down rolls. So I went to some people told me, hey, go see your accountant before you set something up. So they told me to set up a corporation, and it's a subchapter S. And I didn't know a whole lot about it, but I trusted the guy. They told me that he knew what he was doing. And then he taught me a little bit about it. And so what he did for me is he gave me 100 shares of this company, and they were all mine at that point. And there can be different amounts. It could be 100 or 1,000 or 10,000. And at the point that he gave me those 100 shares, they weren't worth anything, right? We just had to open up the company. And then as the company grew in size, the shares were worth more money. And so at the end of the year, depending on how many shares you had, is in essence how much you could earn from that company. So if I sold 10 shares, that person who bought the 10 shares could, in essence, get 10% of the profit of the business at the end of the year. And so I did sell 49% of the company to my associate, or the business partner of mine at the time. And that's how it worked. And we had a good relationship. And actually, hopefully I'm not jumping the gun here, but I ended up buying him out a few years down the road once he was made whole and earned a bunch of money. And so I think he was happy that we made that deal.
And see, that is why it's so important for people in prison to use your time wisely. The sooner you learn about corporate structure and what this means, the more powerful or skillful you're going to be when you emerge from prison. While I was in prison, I really studied the stock market because I wanted to learn about corporate structure and how to value businesses. And one way of thinking of it is it's like a pizza. Right? You think of a pizza as just one whole, but it's got a lot of slices, right? If you have 100 slices, they're bigger slices than if you have 10,000 slices. It's the same pizza, but each one of those shares has value. And that value is going to reflect the total market capitalization of the company. All of that is it's like speaking another language that somebody who's never learned. But if you listen to Casey's story, it is a regular part of growing a business. And the sooner you learn how we structure businesses in America, you can learn about the different types of businesses, whether it's he said subchapter S corporation. That's a type of business that it has taxation implications. There's type C corporations, there's LLCs, there's partnerships, there's sole proprietorships. There's all kinds of things that you could be learning if you wanted to spend your time saying, I'm going to prepare my life to be successful like Casey, and that's one choice. Or you could say, I want to keep up with the Kardashians, and that's another choice. I would submit that being like Casey is going to bring you a lot better return on your time. Casey, I just want to thank you. I know how busy you are. And not only did you agree to help share your story about developing a business from startup to success, but you also agreed to help me write this lesson plan. And I'm encouraging those people in prison, read through Casey's lesson plan, go through the vocabulary lessons, respond to the critical thinking questions, because those are the ways that you are going to help to sell yourself. And that's what we want you to do. We want you to be as successful as Casey. And in your position, Casey, when I reached out to you and told you I wanted to kind of teach and inspire people in prison, my understanding from you was that roofing is a great career for people like with criminal backgrounds. And I'd like you to close out our lesson today, because we're almost out of time, by letting our audience know why roofing is a great career, a great trade for people coming out of the criminal justice system.
Well, I think that roofing is not taught anywhere except for in the industry. And so you can come here and learn a lot of the things that you need to get better, not only in roofing, but in so many other places. And to us, it's not about the education you have. It's not about what law school you went to. It's not about those things. I think there's the basics that are very important to us. And I think they should be the basics that are important to a lot of other industries. Maybe not as much as they are to us, but I really find it important to have, again, just coming to work on time, having basic math skills is big for us. We talk about all the time, like I mentioned earlier about Excel, but again, you just got to have the basics there. And then you have this opportunity that I think is endless. There's no ceiling. And I mean that you can grow, you can be started labor in a pink tag, and you can grow up to be an apprentice very soon. And it's not about like tenure. You don't need 5 years to get to that next tag. Then you can go to be a foreman, and then a superintendent, and then a project manager, and then an estimator. And then there's other things that we have too in accounting and human resources. And there's so many options. And then at that point, once you've learned it, you can do anything you want. But again, for us, I think it's so performance based in our industry. It's just how much you want it. And you can come in here, anybody can come in here in my line of work and be great.
So in 5 years, from starting out first job for $600 to building a company that does more than nearly $30 million in revenues and provides a livelihood for thousands of people, this is an inspiring guy. I'm just so grateful to you, Casey, for being a part of the Prison Professors program. And we will certainly use your story to teach and inspire others. So we're with Prison Professors. We'll be back. If you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you subscribe and like our programs. If you see it on Facebook, we're trying to be the change that we want to see in the world and ending one of the greatest social injustices of our time, which is a wrong-spirited commitment to mass incarceration. We put too many people in prison. They serve sentences that are far too long. People should be handled in civil courts rather than criminal courts many times. But we got to live in the world as it exists, not as we want it to be. And I'm thankful to you, Casey, for helping us share this message.
Thank you for having me.